And hello, welcome to this OPCUA server for Rust kind of a walkthrough. Okay, so it's just for licensing. It's under Mozilla public license. Here's the license. That's the code license. Yeah, but anyway, we just going through how to set it up, because if you actually take a look at the README. Okay, if you take a look at the README, it says the tutorials and user guides are still works in progress. But yeah, I wanted to learn about it and get on to do something. So well, if it's still work in progress, then maybe it's not it's not quite ready. Okay, there is some useful information here, but if you copy and paste the code here, it doesn't really work. If you try to go to the simple server code, it is a little bit complicated because it uses it uses lots of things, like it has a config file, it makes lots of users and stuff. So just for understanding sake, we want to pare that down as much as possible. So what I did is I made my own take of an OPCUA server in Rust and tried to make it as simple as possible so that it's easier to learn the underlying classes behind it. So here it is. Okay, I SSH'd into my other computer, which is a Linux computer. Okay, so just to show it's Linux, it's really Linux computer. I'm not doing it on Windows because Rust libraries tend to work better on this OPCUA server tends to work better, or it's easier to set up in Linux than on Windows because of the OpenSSL libraries that are available, more readily available and easier to install on Linux. So this is a OPCUA server test, and let me open new Vim and yeah, so some prerequisites. I assume you know basic things about Rust. I assume you know what SSH is, how to connect, so on and so forth. And one more thing, I will be using the OPCUA client. So I'll be using the WinPython client. Okay, here's the WinPython client. So supposed to open WinPython. This is, yeah, you open a terminal from WinPython. I assume you know how to do that, and you just do OPCUA client. Okay, so this is the client we'll be using to access the server. Okay, so I have all that ready if you want to know how to do things properly. So this is what the client will look like. It's the free OPCUA client, licensed under GNU GPL3. Here is the license. It's GNU GPL3. Yeah, it's not the lesser public license, it's the full excuse me, the full client GUI license is under GPL3. So here's the license. Okay, but I won't be using any of this code inside the Rust, so I'll be just using the client itself. Okay, so that is the thing. So yeah, it's nice open source client. So yeah, the question is, how do we get the server started? Okay, so I have 5 examples here I've already built up. So I'm going to split the screens, but of course now here we have a lot of information. Here we have a lot of information in these clients or in these examples. So what I like to do is go to my main function right here, and I won't delete what code I already have. I will just kind of comment it out so that it doesn't do anything. Okay, so let me comment this out for up. Okay. And what I like to do is to use cargo watch. Okay, so I assume you know what that is too, cargo watch. Okay, I'm going to open a terminal here and I'll do cargo watch, and then I will just run. So here we just have something that says hello world. Of course, there are lots of warnings over here, but these are because I didn't write documentation for the rest of the things, or there are lots of unused imports as well. But what these are in my examples 1 to 5, and I also imported a local IP address. I will probably tell you why later on. So, okay, so this is the cargo run bit. Okay, and I probably want to open a new tab as well. Okay, and what I'll do is that, okay, so we'll so-called start from scratch and use that example, maybe example 1 as a reference. Okay, and then I'll just make here a live demo folder, and I'll make a mod.rs here, and I will just say demo, well, we'll call this new server. Okay, we'll just call this the new bare bones server.rs. So this is where we will have our file. Okay, in our main.rs, okay, I will have a pubmod, okay, pubmod live demo. So I can include it here, pubmod live demo, because this is the module we want to use. So the live demo module, will be here. It will be that means Rust will search this file. Okay, Rust will search this file called mod.rs, and I want to actually use pubmod this pubmod new bare bones server as well, so that the main code will look into this mod folder, the mod will look into this new bare bones server, and this new bare bones server will have a function like hey pub function demo 1 bare bones server. Okay, so this will be a void function, and I'll just save it like so. Okay, very simple. Okay, so if everything goes well, then we should just have a hello world here. Nothing much happening. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll just say okay pub use live demo. Okay, live demo. Okay, my bare bones server, and I'll use whatever is over here. Okay, I'll save it. Okay, and you just keep saying hello world because there's nothing else but hello world over here. Okay, but we are kind of ready. Okay, so this is the pub function 1 my barebone demo 1 my barebone server. Okay, so the first thing you need to use for opcua server is use opcua. Okay, of course you need to do cargo add opcua server. Okay, if you want to look at the cargo toml file, it's over here. You need okay, where is my dependencies? Yes, here are my dependencies that we are using. One is chrono, one is local IP address, one is opcua. Okay, so how do we start adding? So normally what you'll do is you'll do a cargo add opcua to start. Okay, it will take a while, but yeah, the things, the compiled binaries are pretty decently big, but it's there. You just do cargo add opcua to start, and then what you do is yeah, you'll be able to use the opcua server documents. Okay, so this is what you are supposed to do if you start from a bare bones so-called install. Okay, so we have a opcua. Okay, and then we'll use the server module, and we'll use a prelude, okay, however you pronounce it. So this is what you're supposed to use to start with the opcua server. Okay, so the basic idea here is that we are supposed to have a server object. Okay, we are supposed to have when we want to build a Rust opcua server, we'll have a server object. Yeah, you have a server object, and let's take a look at the source code. Okay, if you go to the server tutorial here, there's a little bit of information, but you can see that all the steps that are required to make a server are kind of compressed into one very, very long line of code here, which it may be a bit confusing, but okay. So we are supposed to make a server object, so it's under this server structure. So we are making a server object. There are many ways to make a server object, but we'll just use the default way, or the simplest way recommended in the documentation, which is to use a server builder. So let's take a look. The server object is under OPCUA library source, under this OPCUA GitHub. Go to server, and you will see the server.rs right here. Server.rs. And this is where you will find all the source code necessary for the OPCUA server. As you can see, the OPCUA server is a public structure, and it has a lot of things inside there, like polling actions, certificate store, server metrics, so on and so forth. And if you take a look at server, it has a so-called constructor-like associated function, okay, which is the new function. Okay, and you can see what's actually going on behind to actually make this server object. Okay, and you need a server config kind of a structure in order to get this started. Okay, so that's what happens. Okay, so that's how you get started creating the server. You need either that server constructor, or even better, what we have is a server builder. Okay, server builder is well, this object which you see right here. Okay, server builder, which you do not need any arguments to make it, to kind of start it up. You just use the server builder, and the source code is right here in builder.rs. You can see that the server builder is a constructor with only one field, okay, or one variable or whatever. It's just called the config variable, which is a server config object. Okay, when you execute the new function, this config file will be it will use the server config default. So you'll make a server config object using some default settings, but you cannot really make a server from there. But this is the step, okay, to take. So this is step one here, which is just making a server builder. So I'm just going to do this. Let server builder equals to server builder new. So this is just the constructor. We are making a server builder object. Okay, unfortunately, this is not really enough to create a server. We still need to add some settings to it. So what are the basic settings that we need? Okay, we need things like the application name and application URI. So okay, application name and application URI. Now, of course, you might see me doing this let server builder equals to server builder.application name, server builder equals to server builder.application URI. Why is this the case? Okay, it's because if you take a look at these methods, server builder, for example, application name. Okay, application name. This is the function for application name. It takes a mutable self object, which is the object itself. Okay, the server builder object. And basically what it does is that instead of using a mutable reference, you are using the object itself. So when you set the application name, the self object is consumed and is not available for use anymore. So the self object is a mutable, it's not a reference anymore. Otherwise, you see the ampersand sign here. But what happens is that basically you're setting the configuration name, self.config application name equals to whatever application name which you set. So this is supposed to be something you type in and it converts it into a string. And then we return the self, or is this, it returns the self object. So the way to use it, okay, we have a server builder equals to server builder.new, and then every time we use the server builder method, we'll need to reassign it. So let server builder equals to server builder dot application name. So this is what it looks like. Let server builder equals to server builder application name, and we'll just call this my opcua demo server. Okay, so basically what happens is that this server builder object gets fed into the application name method, and then this server builder object disappears, so it's not there anymore. Okay, and then what happens is that this application name function actually returns the server builder object back out to something else. So we need to actually rebind the whole thing. Okay, but this is kind of it's a cumbersome way to write. So that's why if you take a look here how the server builder is done, you'll see the so-called functions being used one after another. So so what happens when you execute the first what do you call that, the first method? Okay, this server builder objects gets returned to the environment, but then you re-execute another method which again consumes the server builder in the same process. So what all of this is a more truncated way of writing. Okay, let server builder equals to server builder application name, let server builder equals to server builder dot application URI. So what you're seeing here is a more truncated way of what you're seeing here. So here I actually write everything out so that it's kind of hopefully less confusing, but this is the way you will find it in GitHub. Okay, so so just remember, every time you actually set the application name, application URI, anything of that sort, you'll be consuming the self object and you'll be returning it to the environment. So now I'll just say we will write it the truncated way from now on. Okay, so we need a few things. Yeah, we need a few things. Server builder. Okay, so we'll just use the application URI. We need to set that. So there's a few things: application name, application URI. We'll need the host and port and some discovery URLs, as well as users. Okay, users. Okay, so application URI is here, which we can just say, okay, urn colon opcua sample server. I'm not paying too much attention to what the actual name is. I just copy and pasted this from some of the config files, so don't really bother with that. And just give it a name, okay? And the whole objective of this is just to understand what's going on with the code and build something simple that we can use a client to connect to. Okay, so here it is. Okay, yeah, so here's the thing, and of course we need to return it to the environment again. Okay, so normally I will write a let server builder equals to something, right? So let server builder equals to this, and yeah, let it pass. We'll let it do its thing, and we'll take a look at the thing. Let me do cargo watch x run, and it'll just say hello world. There's nothing really that's being done there. Okay. So what else do we need? Okay, we need to have the host and port. Again, host and port is the same idea. Okay, host and port. You see it takes a mutable self object, so it consumes the self object and then it returns it back same idea here. So what we can do is use the truncated form. Instead of writing, we can of course write it like that, host and port, host and port. The host and port method will of course take in some arguments. So one is a host and one is a port. So the host, what's the host? Okay, the host is, well, yeah, the best way to add the host is the IP address. So what's the IP address? So the way to do it manually is to use IPA. Of course, the IP address will change every now and then. Today, now is 192.168.7.277 or 227. It will change because that's the way things are. So here's the IP address, 192.168.7.227. And the port number, we usually like to put 4840 for OPCUA. Okay, so this is the long way of doing it. Now, if you want to truncate it, okay, we'll just delete this and we'll just delete this server builder. And we'll just have the host and port like so. So this is the truncated way of doing it. And every time we want to add a new setting, we'll just do this. Okay. Okay. So we'll need a host and port for this 192.168.10.177.4840. And then next thing to do is we'll need a path, so to speak. Okay. So the path is basically, besides this IP address and port number, you want to put your OPCUA number somewhere. So I'm just going to make an example path. Let example endpoint path equals to, okay, I'll make a string reference here, a string slice, and stir, and that will be equal to okay, let's try this. Okay, my demo server, we just call this demo server. Okay, semicolon. Okay, so this is the example endpoint path. All right, so what I'll do is that next thing I want to add some discovery URLs, and we are almost done with making this server. So again, I'm going to use the let server builder equals to server builder dot. Okay, dot what? I'll do the discovery URLs, and here we'll need to have a vector of strings. So we'll just use the vec macro, and then we'll use the example endpoint path into. So this converts it into the correct string format. Okay, for this server builder. So if you want to take a look at the source code, see how it works, here it is. It actually is taking a vector of strings. Okay, not the string slice, but full strings, so to speak, full string objects, and it basically formats it for you. And you'll see that the config, the TCP config host and TCP config port, which we set here, host and port, these are being used to make the discovery URLs. Okay, and then of course I wanted to put it under a demo server endpoint path. Okay, and then last thing before we continue is to add an anonymous user, and then we put the endpoint path. Okay, the endpoint path. So how do we do the user and password? So here's something actually I kind of copied from their server code, but it requires a proper user and password. I kind of want to just do away with that, make it simple, and I want to just add an anonymous user. So how do we add anonymous user? An anonymous user is kind of, you don't even need security protocols or anything, so you don't know complicate things, especially just for the sake of learning. So you just want to learn something simple. Okay, the way you can see is okay, we can take a look at this new. Okay, rather I'm just interested in, okay, let me backtrack a bit. I'm more just interested in making a server that accepts connections and can pass data to and fro. Okay, my goal is not, in this case, is not security. I just want something that works. Okay, I don't really need security yet. So the way to do it is to make this anonymous application. Okay, this anonymous application. So for anonymous applications here, we need this user token ID. And what is this here? Okay, what is this here? It takes this anonymous user token IDs, okay, and it converts it to string. What is this anonymous user ID here? This anonymous user ID is under the config thing, okay, anonymous user token ID, okay, it converts it to a string. So let me just copy and paste this. Okay, so now I'll just say adding users and anonymous user. Okay, so yes, that will be it. And I don't know why it is not giving any warnings, but okay, let me just run the new barebone server. Okay, let's see, B# new barebone server.rs, or what's the function name? Demo1 barebone server. Okay, B# demo1 barebone server. Okay, okay, so this is just the user token ID, which uses the anonymous token ID to string. Okay, it seems that this anonymous token ID is actually included in the prelude import, so we don't actually have to do this server config import right here. However, if you want to do it, do the import side, so you are more than welcome to do it. But this is how they do it. It uses the super crate or the super so-called path, and then it loads the config, and under the config it actually has a server anonymous user token ID thing. Okay, so that's what this new anonymous thing actually does. So I just copy and pasted this code here, and we already set the application name over here, so we are not going to do it. We need to set an endpoint, and we need to set the discovery URLs. So we already have the discovery URLs here, and if you want, actually this should be the last step. If you actually follow the way they do things here, okay, people actually do things here. So the last thing before is actually to set this endpoint. Okay, so I'm going to have this let server builder. Okay, add endpoint. I'm going to have this server builder. Let server builder equals to server builder, and what does it say here? Endpoint. Endpoints. Okay, and what is the endpoint here? Okay, well, okay, I'm not going to use the endpoints. I'm going to use one endpoint. Okay, so I'm just going to follow the code here. It just says none, and it says the second one is a server endpoint, new none. And then what is this none here? This none here, it says that when you're talking about security policy, in this case we don't have any security policy. That's why it's called none. So this none actually refers to the security policy. So this is what I'm going to just copy and paste here. So that's actually what's going on. Okay, so if you can see the Rust language server or Rust analyzer, it actually shows what is over here. Excuse me, I think I need some water. Yeah, so what we're doing is just getting the endpoint. So we are looking for endpoint ID, and this T is actually a string type. Okay, so I'm going to put the none thing here. Oops, the none thing here, which is just a string. This is a string, and then the second thing is to have this server endpoint here. So this server endpoint here is, oops, say, Shift V. Okay. This server endpoint is, again, we are having a server endpoint object, and this is the name of this server endpoint. We just call it none. So this server endpoint is a new none, means there's no security policy. That's what the none refers to. And then what's the path we use? It can be a // okay, this default endpoint path is usually just a // which you see here, without this demo server, whatever. But I want to put my own example endpoint path. Okay, so I'm going to ciw example endpoint path. So this is a string, and then it takes a immutable reference to this vector here called the token IDs. So the token ID here is just the anonymous user token ID, which we didn't even bother adding user or password, so that we can just connect straight away. Okay, once this is done, you just add the discovery URLs, and we should be able to build the server. Okay, so how do we build the server? Okay, the last part is actually we use the server object. Okay, if you take a look at the server thing, you have a server function, or a method. Okay, so we look at the server self. Okay, server self. Okay, so this is a pub function server self, and it gives you an option. Okay, so it checks if your config is valid. So it will return an option called some server new self config. So this is a constructor. So remember just now we actually took a look at the server class, and they actually the config file needed to be used. Yeah? So this is the constructor that's being called in this function. So the return type is an option with server. So we actually need to do this unwrapping step. So that's why there's an unwrapping step here. And note that the self object is actually consumed. So it's not a mutable reference. It's just it's not even a mutable object. It's just a self object. So this self object is moved here. That means this function takes ownership, and that's assuming you know what Rust ownership is. So basically, when you feed in self, this thing is here. We use the self object. And once this function is called, the whole server builder object is deleted. Okay, so that's a good memory management actually. So let server equals to server builder dot server. Okay, and I'm going to unwrap it. Okay, so this is the server builder, which we can do the unwrapping, and we take a look at cargo run. It just says hello world. There's nothing interesting here yet. So let's go to main.rs. Okay, demo1 Babel server is running. So yeah, there's nothing here yet. Okay, the last step to actually run the server is just to use the server.run function. Server.run. Okay, method, excuse me. So the server.run method actually consumes the server object. Okay, if you take a look here at inside the server.rs, you will see that under implementation of server, you will have a run function, run self. Okay, so it says here runs the server and blocks it until it's completed by aborting or by an error. A server should be run in its own thread. So you can see that the server run method actually takes the self, and then after that it locks it up and it runs the server. However, once the server runs, you cannot edit it anymore, so to speak. Okay, you cannot edit the whole object unless you or mutate variables within it, unless you add some things later on, and that one we can cover later. So the thing is, let's take a look. Yeah, now we have a server.run, and it will just say hello world, but it will not be running anything here. So you won't be able to see anything because we didn't get it to print lines. However, if we take a look at the endpoint that we set, which is 192.168.727.227, the port number 4840, and we use the demo server. So what's the address look like? So it should look like this: 192.168.277, 4840 port number, and you have this opctcp : IP address colon port number, and then you have the demo server. Okay, you can just connect it. Okay, this is connected to my other PC via Wi-Fi. You connect it, you should be fine. Okay, if you connect it properly, you should be able to see these things here: root, object, types, and views. Under each folder, there are some defaults. So there are some data types and event types under here, but these ones we won't be touching. Most of our things that server variables and nodes, they will be under the objects folder usually. Okay, so if you did everything right, we should be able to get this thing running. Okay, and that's how we make a very basic server that we can connect to. Okay, so of course, if you don't want to connect to this server right here via this IP address, you can change the IP address to a localhost address. Okay, so you can use a localhost IP address if you don't want to connect to another PC. Note that this is IP version 4. Okay, 127.0.0.1. Okay, so this is the IP version 4 address. So we usually use IP version 4 for this host and port here for simplicity's sake. Okay, so here's the example endpoint path. Okay, okay, of course there's a lint here saying example endpoint path should have a snake case name, which at this point I don't really care. Okay, yeah, I'll not care about this, but we have completed our objective, which is basically we wanted to make a simple OPCUA server and at least know what's going on, and then we run the server and we're able to connect to it using an OPCUA client. So this is how we make the Rust server using that server builder method.